Yeah, please send your questions up. I have a few that I took as they were speaking. You may have taken some also. Send them up. Okay, so first of all, thank you both of you for a wonderful talk. It was very interesting. Very exciting to hear how Tanakh can be taught. Very interesting. I mean, everyone was sitting here and engaged in the lesson and learned it very. Yeah, and when often a Tanakh class can be boring, here it was not at all. So my first question for you is as follows. On behalf of every single person here, we all agree completely with what you said, right? All right, I have an idea actually. All right, Esther said, she gave us a whole bunch of the hyperliteral, the pshat, the mysticism. She told us, and she taught us, showed us a different way of learning Tanakh. And Rabbi Hidary also had shown us using the archaeology and using the coins and the things, how we can look at it in a different way. So on a show of hands, how many people in this room actually do agree that that is an engaging, great way to study Tanakh?
You don't have to.
You don't have to. It's a question.
You don't get hurt feelings.
So, do you agree or disagree? Do you agree? Raise your hand if you agree that the way that Rabbi Hidary and Esther both describe teaching Tanakh using archaeology, using deeper layers of looking at the pshat and looking at what it really represents, do you agree that that would probably be a great way to teach our children and to learn?
Yes.
Okay, great. So they're all convinced. That's wonderful. So, I have a question to you two. You guys are involved in education, in schools. Within our community here, let's say the Brooklyn Sephardi community, the greater community, where Beth Torah is, that's our embassy, right? How many of the schools follow what you were saying? And if not, all these people that agree with you, why aren't there kids in schools that do teach it that way?
You go. I represent the school.
First of all, I do
No
want
specific schools, just in general.
just to distract everyone, I really want to thank Jeffrey Dweck and all of Beth Torah for putting together this amazing program. Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming.
It's a misdirection in magic.
Well, I would like to say something about my own experience going to an unnamed school. When I went to Israel, I had met a lot of good teachers. I could remember some of them who did make things engaging, and some of them not. But I'll tell you, when I went to study in Israel in Yeshivat Gush Etzion, I studied with a teacher there named Menachem Liebtag. Many of probably now he became famous, but back when I had him, he wasn't famous yet. He did a lot of this approach, kind of literary, borrowing from some of the things of modern scholarship, bringing it into the Bet Midrash, into a religious setting. And myself and all the other yeshiva graduates who were there, after every class, had the same reaction. Why didn't we ever learn this text before, right? What is this chumash? We've never seen this before, the way he's teaching it. And why didn't they teach it to us this way when we were in school? So I think that was a common experience. So the positive side of that is many of those people, many of my peers, eventually went on and became rabbis and teachers. And they took all that they learned and are bringing it into classrooms across America and in Israel. The place where I went has a teacher's college, Machon Herzog. Some of you maybe have been going to the summer program that they have. On Sundays, you have to see the place full, hundreds of teachers from around the country studying in this way. I think of Nechama Leibovich, who actually, Rabbi Dr. Hasson had the privilege of being one of the last students and going to her home, has trained a whole generation of teachers using a lot of these methods. So I think that education today, in many places, is much improved than it was before, but we still have ways to go.
I agree. I really do think we're on like an upward trajectory with this. I think most young new teachers are already within this frame of mind, and they enjoy doing like a literary study of Tanakh. That said, I still think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear. It's very scary to innovate anything in Judaism in general. It's an ancient religion, and we want to maintain it, and we want to make sure that we're transmitting it correctly. We don't, like the CAC analogy, right? Like it doesn't matter if you could figure out how to make cake a little better. If this is the way Grandma Bennett made the cake, make the cake the way she made it, right? She knew what she was doing. And I think that happens a lot when we try to innovate anything, which is, who are we to innovate? And are we sure that we're doing the right thing? And to have the audacity and the confidence to be able to move forward in a new direction, it is scary, and it does take a big leap. So I think while there are many schools who are saying, let's move forward, they want to do it cautiously because they want to say, let's make sure that we're not losing anything in transmission either. Let's make sure that we're really staying true to our traditions and staying true to who we are and what we're all about. I think that's one. That's the nice answer. The scarier answer is that mysticism stuff that we were talking about. When religion is reduced to something mystical, when you mess with magic, the potion doesn't work as well. It takes 3 unicorn feathers, not 4. So any type of shifting in the way things are done creates great anxiety. And I think that we have to get people to feel okay with themselves. I mean, this is a little controversial, but there are many, many Jews, and you might be sitting in this audience, who have been taught and believe that every generation of Jews is one step lower than the generation that came before. Yes? And maybe everybody here says it's true, Esther. And so it's actually quite a dangerous way to think about the world. Because if you think that you are just moving further and further away from holiness, from knowledge, or from ability, then how could you innovate? How could you change things? How could you think for yourself? And how could you teach differently? And so we have to start shifting that dialogue already. And you maybe want to do a raise of hands around that, because if we're not really out of that way of thinking, then we're never going to start teaching Tanakh differently. We don't believe in ourselves enough to really be the inheritors of this tradition and the new innovators of this tradition.
If I can add one thing to what I said.
But my answer was good.
Very good.
Yeah.
I want to add one thing to what I said before, which I think Nachama Leibers, Menachem Limtei, these things have entered discourse in many, many schools. The examples I was bringing tonight, you probably won't find there. I think this is a little bit more on the cutting edge of scholarship and requires a little bit more digging, sometimes literally digging in the ground to bring out. So myself and a few of my colleagues at Yeshiva University have actually started a project, which you can go to. It's at teachtorah.org, where we've created lesson plans, detailed lesson plans dedicated for high school teachers, together with source sheets, PowerPoints. This is not a sales pitch because I'm not making any money out of it. We've created detailed lesson plans on several books of Tanakh, as well as some other subjects. These are now being used by dozens of teachers in schools across America and other countries. One of them was translated to Spanish for South American schools. And I think this is making an impact. And the reason why the people writing this come from Yeshiva University is because these scholars, they have PhDs, they're able to plumb the depths of obscure journals and bring out those nuggets that can really help revive, inspire the subjects that teachers are teaching. And have gotten wonderful feedback from teachers, and I think this is one of the most important projects that we can work on.
Right. And as Jeffrey said, since you two are leading the way in education in our community and other communities, I would just say personally, I hope that you guys do it very soon before we lose any more children to being bored in learning Tanakh. Because I do think, as Esther said, Tanakh is, I think many of you here agree, an incredibly important basis of our religion. And the sooner our schools can engage the kids in this, I think it would be great. Okay, I'm going to follow up with that on a question. I don't remember how many years ago, let's say 10, I don't know, let's see. Some years ago, Merkaz, an organization in Brooklyn run by Rabbi Hidary and by Esther, had a seminar. And on that seminar, I remember one of the questions that was asked was, if you're going to try to bring new people who aren't observant or who aren't connected into Judaism, if you're going to bring them in and try to encourage them, try to get our kids excited, what would you start with, was the question, the provocative question that was asked in the seminar, and the group had to kind of answer. Would you start with the nitty-gritty halachot of exactly how to cook on Shabbat, or would you start with some of the nicer, more easily understandable, being nice to the neighbor and giving charity and things like that? Which would be the way that you would start? I know that a lot of synagogues like the style of, let's say, Esha Torah, and a lot of these kiruv organizations that have their own methods. A lot of them, I think, connected more to what Esther is talking about, more the mystical and the magical type of way to get people to think you'll be holy if you come in here. I was wondering what your approach is, and what you think the best approach to use is, and how you do that. And if you can comment on, I know you guys were in the city. I think Esther had engaged with a lot of people who were not so connected and brought them in, and maybe you can give us experiences of what worked and what didn't, and what we can use.
So first I'd say, that there's a lot of different entry points to Judaism, and different people enter in from different places and for different reasons. And one of the things I think we have to do is to demonstrate to people that Judaism is very complex, very dynamic, and has very many different entry points. I think where people go wrong is they think that there is one way to be a Jew, and it's the right way, and we're all either doing it the right way or doing it the wrong way. Instead of saying what we know to be true, which is, I know that you look like you're doing a lot of Jewish-looking things, but are you cheating on your taxes and lying and cheating? And also on the flip side, I know you're a good person, but do you keep the halachot? And people love to have these arguments with each other rather than entering into a conversation of, oh, we all have a different way of engaging with this, and they're all valid, because who's going to say that somebody who's living a very decent, honest life is not not following the Jewish way of life, right? Does anybody really want to make that statement? So, we had a conversation recently with these people that we did this I would never, in any of my classes, I don't think I've ever used the word kiruv. Really, what we did together with this group of people is we opened up a Tanakh, we started reading, and we discovered together, and it was not a forced discovery. And I have to say this 5 million times. I'm looking at Susie, right? It's not a forced discovery when we talk about the Torah together. It wasn't like I found things that weren't there. We opened it up and we're like, oh, it's truly amazing. There's really profound things to be said here. We're working with really good material, okay? I mean it. It's not like we have to discover something to inspire people with. We are working with what I truly believe is the source of inspiration in life. So it's easy work. And a lot of what we do is to find a very humanistic connection to things that seem dry and obscure, which is, why do you, like that example that you gave about the Mishnah, I think was very perfect. Like, you take something that people think is just like dry, obscure law, and you tell them, actually, it's about like the human spirit and the human soul and your experience of reality. But then I was thinking about how we broke it down into these four entry points. People enter because of humanistic reasons, where they find that in Judaism it talks about taking care of the widow or the orphan, being a good person, be honest and just. You could enter because it has cultural, historical value for you. It's what your grandmother did, it's what your great-grandmother did. And a lot of disenfranchised Jews actually don't want to disenfranchise from their history or from the state of Israel, and that's their entry point. For some people, the entry point is a sense of commandment, a sense of feeling connected to the laws and to being commanded by God and being in a relationship with Him and living a commanded life. And the last one is a sense of mysticism and magic, which you can't discount, because there is an entire spiritual level to the engagement with God and in Judaism. And I think if you're in a dynamic conversation about all four of those at the same time, and you don't limit yourself to one or the other and say this is what it is, anybody can put their foot into the water of Judaism. I think we have to let go of judgment. We have to open up our doors to people. We have to stop judging. I said let go of judgment twice, but we have to stop judging each other around who's a Jew. Okay, who's a Jew? Yeah.
I would add to that one other entry point that overlaps with those, which is community.
That was my cultural thing.
I think that when someone comes into a Chabad center, a Kabbalah center, this Bet HaKnesset, any Bet Midrash, whatever institution it is, being befriended, someone coming over, and then becoming part of a network, part of a family, that you admire, then makes you say, well, what makes these people tick? I want in, and I'd like to learn more. And so I think that intellectual has to come after an emotional and personal bond.
That's such a good answer. I really like that because I actually think we were saying that something that happens in the city that doesn't happen in Brooklyn and we want to make it happen is beautifully, we all eat by our families' houses on Friday night and Saturday. But in the city, there's not that type of intense family, so everybody is inviting each other to, friends eat together. And I think we're such a tight community that we don't realize that we have to do kiruv, which is invite people over, extend the boundaries of what it means to be a family, and I think Judaism becomes that much more accessible. Have your students over, have the kids over, create conversations, right? Let everybody feel like they could be part of a family.
And definitely, I think the past 3 years, we come to appreciate even more the value of the community that we have, that we live in. And so we have already that social structure. So we have a head start upon which we can build everything else. Whereas in Manhattan, even though there's 1 million people living on your block, you might not know anybody's name. And so then coming to a place like Sheretz Israel, you're immediately enamored by the beauty, by the singing, by the architecture, and then you get to meet people. And actually one of the fun things in Sheretz Israel was to meet new people. And one thing I could do there that I can't do here is if I meet someone who I don't know, I could ask them their name, right? And where they're from, and
It's a
so
very
on.
big problem for us.
Here,
Everybody
I'm
thinks
supposed
we
to know
know
everybody. And so I always have to, who is that guy who I've seen 100 million times, who's in my class?
Who's my first cousin? Yeah. But it was very funny because in the city, everybody would be like, "You guys are so friendly." I'm like, I think we literally only said hello to them, but it's like there's like a coldness in the world that our community doesn't know from. We have that, so I think it's something we could bring to Judaism also.
Could you add utility as an entry point?
Yes, I think that's almost the mystical piece, the utility. There's a utility there for them,
No,
and I feel like it's
by
sort of.
utility, I don't mean, I mean,
Oh, sorry.
like wisdom literature or whatever, that it works and it's just good enough to live a good life. And
Yeah,
there's data and it's been running for 3,000 years and
Right.
it works.
it works.
And people
Yeah,
enter that way.
I think that's a
Thinking
great
people.
one. Yeah.
Proven system.
So along those lines, and along what you were saying about you find the community and you respect them and you want to be like them. So that's from the educator standpoint. How about from a parent standpoint? How do you engage your kids that way and let them see how much you're connected to it and how much you're connected to your parents? There's always this new, the children's minyan and things like that, where I think we've moved away from children praying next to their father or next to their mother and learning from their parent. Our children are doing most of their learning, or it's in some families in school, and maybe not as much from their parents. What's your opinion on that? And do you have a way of engaging them and connecting them to your own traditions and history?
Me? Okay, I'll answer first because I actually see Jeffrey. I want to make sure we also get to a lot of questions. We'll go fast. We speak about this a lot. If you don't know Dr. Hasson, and we're all best friends, and I set him up with his wife. And something that we speak about a lot, which is the irony of Jewish education. The irony of Jewish education is that parents have deferred Jewish education to institutions. They've allowed their children to be raised by other people for most of the day. And they figure, and then they get angry at the school, and they're like, you're not teaching them enough. Okay, and then we're like, what'd you do on Friday night, did you take them to shul? Do your children know what your family stands for and believes in? Do your children know what you want them to be learning? Do they know your value system? Do they know who you are? Because every single night, you have to sit with them and talk to them. And every single night, you have to open up the books. And every single Saturday, every single Shabbat, you have to spend concrete time talking not about inconsequential things, but talking about what you believe as a family. And my parents, I'm just saying it. I was going to say it, and they walked into the room. Okay, they just walked in, and I quote this all the time that people do not believe me. They say, Esther, how did you become the person that you are? I'm like, what? First, let me just answer. I did not become it. My parents shaped me to become this person. So my father, and this is the weird thing, he sent me to a school whose ideology he disagreed with, okay? And so every night he would spend time, I think he called it unbrainwashing me, right? Deprogramming me. And so he put a lot of time and effort into the deprogramming. And sometimes I wonder if it's good to send your kid to a place like, I don't think they teach you anything. So every night I'm going to teach you again. Because then the parents, I think that's how we get to our kids, by actually spending time talking to them.
So the schools are great. They're doing exactly.
They're doing too good of a job. Right.
I'll add something very quickly. In picking a school, the most important thing is probably not the name of the school or the teachers or the curriculum or anything else. Probably the most important thing are the other kids in your kids' class, because they're going to be probably the biggest influence on them. And who are the families, and how are they all being brought up? Because that's the people that they're talking to day in and day out.
To a degree, but you also need to create independent children who know how to cope with the fact that all over the society there's going to be people saying and doing crazy things, and that they are a unique individual with a unique family and a unique point of view.
So you disagree with that?
I'm just editing.
That's what I meant. And also being ourselves role models. If our kids see us spending time studying, praying, and being devoted to chesed.
Leading by example.
Bringing our children into the conversation about where should we give tzedakah to. Why don't you check out this organization and see if you think it's a good one. Involving them and showing them that this is something you care about. They're looking for all.
Meanwhile, every time Ricky and I talk about stuff like this in public, I'm always like, let's say they're 13. I hope it all comes out good. Yeah.
All right, so we talked about schools, we talked about the families. Another major institution in our communities is obviously the synagogues. Now, Esther mentioned that there are 3 problems in the way we study Tanakh. 3 of the problems, I guess. One is the hyperliteral, one is the pshat drash issue, one was the mystical issue. I noticed that many synagogues in the TFCBJ world, as Jeffrey said, will very often send out these emergency Tehillim reading, right? And you have to say this incantation, which is the way many people take it, because if you can read these 7 words as fast as you can before the guy has the surgery, then he will come out okay. Now, we have a lot of sensitivity, and we love to all pray for each other, and we love to pray for other community members who need our help. Do you think using the Tanakh that way, and emailing that and having people have that feeling about Tanakh, hinders their learning Tanakh in the way you're thinking of teaching it? And if so, do you think it's worth telling the synagogues, maybe we shouldn't do that? Or do you say, leave that be, even if it's going to make us lose a lot of people from understanding Tanakh the right way, and just not fight that
I'll answer quickly because I've answered this question a million times. I always say, this is my magic thing. Remember before I said the difference between fake magic and real magic? So I say there's real magic in a bunch of people coming together out of love and concern for one of their friends or family members or community members, and needing to share that time together and to pray together and to be there for one another. And that's what a Tehillim reading is. And that's the very heart. If you've ever been to a Tehillim reading, that's really what it is. It's a way of coming together as a community and feeling like you're doing something in the time that you can do nothing, okay? And whether you're baking a challah or saying Tehillim or just staring, you want to do something. You want to feel productive. Of course, it's very dangerous because if you've ever done a Tehillim reading with me, I force everybody to read each word and then analyze it with me. Because I actually think if you take your time with the Tehillim, the reason we read Tehillim is for a reason. It's the most powerful, inspiring thing that you could read in a time of great sorrow and trouble. We have a voice that could express it in ways we can't. And so I don't think we should stop them, but I think we should develop sensitivity around, do not empty these words out. Don't think that they're an incantation and a chant, because if you do, you're doing something very dangerous for yourself, for the text, for your children. But it doesn't mean, we have to get rid of it.
I'll say my father-in-law was here, was writing a groundbreaking commentary on Tehillim, and when it's published, I think that will change our perspective of and appreciation for the.
Only $29.99.
All right, a question from the crowd over here. Esther had mentioned the repetitive stories in Tanakh. So somebody over here went through a few of them, like the sibling rivalry story, the Yitzhak and Rivka communication issue between husband and wife, the rebellion of Korach power stories, the king stories, all the different things. And he wrote over here, and these issues are still ongoing today.
Right.
So do you use, I guess his question is, do you use those stories in actually teaching us how to...
So this is what I told the kids this, because we're talking about the famine stories, like the sister wife story. I said, guys, do you really think that every single one of our avot happened to meet his wife at a well? Like, it's just like this weird thing. Because it's weird, like they really went to the watering hole to meet each other. Like that's just where the only place that girls were, you know. And we spoke about how you have to look for the pattern, and you have to see that the pattern is there to teach you a lesson. And the reason it's being repeated is so that you can look at the repetition and look at the differences and pull from the differences the deeper meaning of the text. And if you don't start to read repetitive stories in Tanakh that way, as commentaries on each other, you are not understanding the stories. And it goes to basic good reading skills. I'm sorry, that's what it is. I'm looking at Jack, you're in my line of sight. We're both English teachers, right? And it's frustrating for us when kids open a regular book and they're not great readers sometimes. So, kal v'chomer for this. Of course you have to read these repetitive stories as ways of leading us to certain types of knowledge about the function of humanity, the function of the world, the way things operate.
Just this week, someone asked me this question. Cain, after he kills his brother, he says, I'm going to be a wanderer. All those who find me will take revenge and kill me. I says, well, who else is there in the world who's going to kill him? So I said, well, that's precisely the point. This story about Cain is not just about one person, but is the prototype. He's the first brother, and the first act of sibling rivalry. And his brother's fighting about religion. And as soon as I said that, everybody turns, oh yeah, I have a brother who also fight about religion, right? So this is a commentary on the structures of families and society, showing us the problems and hopefully leading us to a better place.
All right, another question from the crowd. I can't read the last word, but I don't think we need it. It says, as a teacher, what was your most difficult something? Question. Thank you.
Oh, what was the most difficult question you've gotten? Want this one? No? I have so many! The most difficult question. I'm trying to think of the questions I got this week, okay? Questions this week. I got the slippery slope question, which is, well, if we're not supposed to take this piece completely literally, then what do we do? Oh, this was the question. She said, if Hashem did not want us to take every single one of the stories in the Torah literally, why didn't he just say that in the beginning? Like, before he says Bereshit, like intro. Like, note to the reader. But it sounds like a simple question, but it was a big question. She's like, who are you to say what you're saying? Like, why, and on what authority? And the only authority that really counts is God's authority, and it doesn't say it in the Torah, so then what do we do? I think that's a challenging question. I don't know, it was a long answer. All about, well, I think because it doesn't say it, that's how much it assumed that you were never going to take it so literally. Like, it was like so inherent that the idea of giving a warning was not there. Maybe. But there's been many difficult questions. How do you know there's a God? Why are we even reading this? You keep telling us they're talking to us about belief and about systems. Or, can I just be a good person? Why do I need halakha? That's the question we get every single day, right? Or can I, isn't it dangerous to talk about being a good person? We need to stick to halakha. These are all the questions we get constantly. And there's many answers, and we must be brave enough to answer them.
So connected to that is another question from the crowd, a difficult question. And she wrote over here, or he wrote, looks like girls handwriting.
Oh my gosh. Ronnie.
How do we keep Judaism relevant to the young adults who were raised in observant homes, and despite that, these young adults won't have nothing to do with Judaism, yet they were raised in an observant home? And do you have any advice for people on what to do in those situations?
Parents? For parents or for those kids?
The families.
I would think the question was for the parents.
For both.
Both.
How do you engage the children to
Told you it was a
stay
girl.
in the
Right.
They want to participate, and they're raised in give and take families, educated families, observant families. They have Friday night dinners together, they have discussions, it's not.
What do you got?
That's probably the most difficult question that I think about often. I think, and there are many, you have to do every approach you can. When you're fighting a battle, you use conventional and intelligence, and you do everything you can. I think a big part of it is creating social structures to get them involved. The way we used to have matzo ball dances here. So whatever that modern equivalent is going to be, just get them involved in community, in synagogue, for whatever reason, bring the best food, bring rook coffee to Brooklyn. If that'll get them to come, that's what I just did.
We literally served rook coffee on a Saturday.
I sent
They
someone to
came
deal to
for the
get rook coffee, to bring it to synagogue, so they would come on Shabbat morning, and we had like 80 people. So you get them by hook or by crook or by rook.
Tied to that question, I asked the question yesterday of science versus God, and the fact that in college, basically, God is assaulted. Religion is attacked, it's denigrated, it says it doesn't exist. And these children are being subjected to this in a tremendous assault. And how do we prepare the students for this?
One thing you could do is send them to Yeshiva University. I mean it.
He's being serious.
I'm being serious. I mean, my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Lichtenstein, we often had many conversations. And he said, there's no reason for any undergraduate not to go to Yeshiva University. You get a wonderful education. You continue your Jewish education. We should. I mean, I work there, but I don't get a bump for every person I recruit. It's an amazing institution that we have in our city. So why not? There's an honors program. I mean, whatever. I'll tell you more about it if you want. Anyway, that's one answer. The other part of it is, well, we have to prepare them, especially regarding Israel. I remember I took the Zionism class in Yeshiva Flatbush, and worked. We're all very Zionistic, but then I went to YU, so I didn't have the BDS problem. But when I got to graduate school, I met a fellow student who's a Palestinian. He was telling me his side of the story, which I had never heard. I was not prepared for it. I was not prepared to figure out what he's saying that's true, what is not. I'm looking it up. A lot of what he's saying is true. How do I deal with it? I think this is something that really the high schools and parents more and more really need to confront head on.
I think it's the hardest question. I do think it's the hardest question. I think a lot of what we have to do goes back to that answer around flexibility. Like, who says that your child wants nothing to do with Judaism? Are you sure that you're defining that accurately? That would be my first thing. Are you sure that he's not really having anything to do with community and Judaism and goodness and truth and honesty and love and Torah? Are you also sure that maybe he or she needs to go on their own journey and discover it again? I find almost all the time that once these children get married and start families of their own, suddenly they're singing a different tune. And they come back to the place where they began. They come back to themselves. And if we create so much agony and tension over their questions and over their dilemmas that they feel they have to break from us in order to find themselves, that's also not healthy. So we need to know that sometimes they're going to need to do some exploration that feels very uncomfortable for us, but might be very necessary for them, and that they very well might return if there's a certain amount of safety for that to happen. That said, I think we should give our kids good answers to hard questions. We have to stop being so afraid. If we really believe that Judaism is a wonderful, profound, life-saving, world-saving belief system, then we should really never be afraid of anything that they're going to confront us with. Which I've said to my students and I said to my kids, I'm like, hit me. I promise you I have a good answer. Yeah.
So I think one ingredient that's missing in all of this is, yes, it's important to do Hasson. Yes, it's important to just do basic tradition, just, voting and going to shul, cooking for Shabbat, and creating a Jewish home. I think we have to bring joy into everything. And I think that will save our children. And that will save us. And it'll save Judaism just by making everything happier.
I think happier maybe, I think the things that a parent is passionate about, usually their children somehow become passionate about. I'm thinking about my brother-in-law. I'm sorry, I'll say his name, Avi Miz. I was listening, Avi Mizrahi, I was listening to his son reading Torah. His son is 12. That boy loves reading from the Torah. And it's not a mystery, because when you see his father, it's his whole life, and he loves it. So you're like, how did he do it? He didn't do much. He just did what he loved, and he shared his love and his happiness, the joy of that thing with his kid. people say, "Oh, how come you love Tanakh?" I'm like, have you met my father? No, he loved it. Every single day was the most exciting thing we're going to do today is read the Torah. Oh, so I love doing it. Okay, and that I think goes to what you're saying, Sarah. Like if you go to shul and your kids see you, like, if you're like, you know what, this is fun. I'm going to see my friends. We're going to hang out. We're going to be a community. Maybe we'll talk to God. We'll continue. Okay, it's fun. It's the funnest place. You get coffee and donuts. Like there's nothing bad happening. Yeah.
And I would just add on the comment over there about the science. It's also just, even though it is very important to be careful when you go to college, how the children can be influenced, I don't want people to come away with thinking that science automatically turns people off of religion and that it's something that's against religion. As a chemistry major when I was in college, every time we went to lab, I was like, this is incredible. God is amazing. So it really, I think, starts from where the basis that we gave our children before they went there. The way my father raised me was every time he took us to a national park, he goes, look how amazing this mountain that God created geologically 8 billion years ago. And it wasn't an issue of science versus religion, science and religion. It was just all one thing. Science is religion. And when we raise our kids that way, I think they grow up that way. Okay, before I have any more questions, I think we're almost done with the Hillary versus Trump debate. Any other questions from the crowd? Because I do want questions from the crowd. The question is, can we go home?
Getting tired. But
One last question from there.
Just one last question. Is there a book that you could recommend that we as parents could read that when we're trying to talk to a child of that nature, that would help us to...
I would recommend Rabbi Shammah's book for if you're reading the Parashah with your child. You should read Recalling the Covenant. It's one of the most profound and wonderful analyses and short and approachable of the weekly Parashah. What?
I was counting how many things you've sold tonight.
My father's book is coming out. Rabbi Shammah's book is great. My husband wrote a wonderful book also.
Don't read that one.
That one's amazing. If you could get past the title, if you understand the title, read the rest of the book. And that's about how halacha works. So it's on these different levels. I don't know. I always say it's not one book. There's not a magic book out there. Start from the things that you love. Believe in the Torah. Believe that you have a great tradition. Believe in your community. Believe that the laws are there for a purpose, and build from there. Yeah. Ronnie, what was? Yeah. Sorry. I got on the name.
Rabbi Sachs's books on science, on
Rabbi
religion,
Sachs's.
they're really well written and well thought out. And the other book is Genesis, Exodus.
Very good book written a long time ago. Yes.
And also on Ricky's website, which we'll sell again, teachtorah.org, and on Merkaz, you have great lectures for people who don't like reading and like listening, because not all of us can read.
My dad wanted to say something. Huh?
I just wanted to say that Sammy's question is really, he gave a book to read, and she's knowing probably the best one.
Yeah, I did.
But he really has a real problem, because it's a matter of how to interpret. You could read a book, you don't have the material explained properly or interpreted properly, or you yourself are not properly inspired, meaning Sammy himself, and it's very difficult for him to transmit that to the kids. And he's super bright, and there's lots of problems, and it's like there's a lot of parents like him with their back against the wall, and I think that when, as he said, when they're confronted in a university context, there's not enough out there to counteract what they're seeing. I saw that with your brother.
I agree. I think, something I spoke about recently at the open house of the Yeshiva Flatbushes, if we're not going to start to say that being intelligent and intellectual and scientific and a reader of philosophy and the arts and literature, all the things that they're going to experience in college, if we're not going to start to truly say that these are part of a conversation that Judaism was always already in, and to be teaching the kids when they're very young that all their experiences of this knowledge is part of a Jewish identity and part of Jewish ideas, and help them create that tie, that Hidary heart. And I do think that is the responsibility of our Jewish educators, because parents shouldn't have to feel like they're out there in the world trying to have all the answers to every question. We have a huge community. We have so many resources. We need to build better systems to get them to a healthier place. And I'm very committed to doing that together with everybody in this room, and together with my husband, and together with Rabbi Ronnie Hasson. That is why we've given our lives to this, because we do think that there is a real threat out there. I'm sorry if I minimize. I do think there is a real dangerous threat out there to our future and our survival as a nation. And we have to fight the good fight together. I really see it as a battle, and it's something we have to spend a lot of time and effort in our synagogues and in all our institutions. There's no, like we said, there's no magic book, but we are a magic community, and I really think we could do it. Yeah.
I'll just bring up Rabbi Hidary's point, which was very valid. How to teach science and religion in high school and how to combat it. Many years ago, Rabbi Labaton gave us a course in Jews for Jesus. What they say, what the answers were, what they try to pick out, which part of the pasuk. So he gives very thorough analysis of every part of it. So if anybody will stop, because we think we're so insulated that we're never going to have these questions when we send our kids out. My first cultural shock was after 12 years of yeshiva, going to City College of New York.
Right.
I mean, they told me things that I couldn't believe, and I was over running yarmulke for 12 years. You know, I'm seeing Asians, I'm seeing different people. It was a whole different culture shock, which I was never prepared for. This goes back a few years though. But very relevant is teaching science and religion in high school and teaching how to answer these
I completely agree with you. I feel like, I just actually rewrote the curriculum for the Tanakh curriculum for the Yeshiva of Flatbush in the high school. We're doing a new curriculum this year in the 12th grade, and we're doing Bereshit. And we're going back to the story of Genesis, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the answers to those questions before you leave. And I have to just make mention, let's say Marlene Mamie is sitting here. She came to me a few months ago. She said, my son went to college, and he learned about Israel, and it was a complete shock to his system, and he wasn't prepared. So instead of passively accepting that situation or complaining, she started a whole movement. She got an organization together. She's advocating for change in her school, and she changed things. She changed things literally within 2 months. And now the curriculum has shifted because she made that effort. And I'll go back to the very beginning, where Ronnie said, "Raise your hands if you agree," and we all raised our hands. If that's true, then our institutions should be reflecting the passion and the commitment that we all have in this room together, and we have to be working more directly and in a more committed way to pushing back against a very large tide that is not speaking the way we're speaking tonight, and really making an effort to be very pronounced in this, because the reason why we're afraid of not having these conversations is because science exists, okay, and reality exists, and if our kids don't have good answers for reality itself, for logic itself, Judaism will implode, right? Yeah.
Well, I don't, we have issues to deal with, but we should also keep in mind the positive and our success stories. We have so many young men and women who have come through our system and have gone to college and remain inspired and are becoming our next leaders. Well-read and so impressive. I'm just thinking, today I was thinking about a young man in this community, Abraham Esses. Hope I'm not embarrassing him. But we had him over, and he gave me a book to read about Karl Popper, the philosopher of science. And he says, "Rabbi, can you read this? I want to discuss it with you." And Popper says, science can't prove anything definitively. It can only disprove more and more things that are false, and that gets us closer to truth. As soon as I read that, I said, this is the Rambam. This is how he says we can never know God, but we can know what is not God, and that's how we get closer to God. And this is a young man who came from our community and is going to be a next thought leader, a next community leader. And there are many, many examples of that. So we're doing a lot of great things that we can be proud of, and should encourage us to not give up.
So positive.
So, just like whenever we read Tanakh, we always like to end on a positive pasuk, so we'll end on that positive note. Thank you everyone for coming. Jeffrey, this is an amazing program you put together.